Here in Idaho, it's been nearly a decade since the state executed someone on death row. Recently, one of Idaho's longest-serving death row inmates made headlines. Gerald Pizzuto Jr. He's been on death row for 36 years.
Earlier this year, the Commission of Pardons and Parole voted to reduce his death sentence to life in prison instead. He's now terminally ill and no longer a threat to anyone, is what they deemed. That case is still being litigated, but it did get us wondering about all the intricacies of the death penalty and reasons why some, like Pizzuto, are on death row in Idaho for decades. Our Shira Matsuzawa looked into it.
Now, there are 27 states, including Idaho, that currently authorize capital punishment in the United States, and those states are in red. 3 of those states have a moratorium on executions: Pennsylvania, California, and Oregon. And as you're probably aware, the death penalty is complicated, and there are many people who play a role in it, including witnesses. Behind this fence sit some of Idaho's death row inmates. 8 people are currently on Idaho's death row, including one female, Robin Rowe. Idaho's longest-serving death row prisoner, Thomas Creech, was sentenced nearly 4 decades ago in 1983.
The death penalty has been taking longer and longer, and it's gotten longer over time. In 2000, the Bureau of Justice Statistics said that the average amount of time that an individual was on death row was 7.7 years. At the end of 2020, the Bureau of Justice Statistics said the average was 19.4 years.
Robert Dunham is the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center. It's a nonprofit that doesn't take a position for or against capital punishment.
It takes a long time for cases to be properly looked at.
We spoke with L. Lamont Anderson, the chief of the Capital Litigation Unit in the Idaho Attorney General's office, to explain the process and why it takes so long. He says it starts with the trial. That's followed by the sentencing hearing.
If a death sentence is imposed, then they have what we call post-conviction relief.
From there, it can go through a complex route of higher courts, with some making it all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
Within that time frame, you can have successive post-conviction petitions that get the federal proceedings sidetracked. And so to do the review that is involved, at least in Idaho, it just takes a very long time.
So long that Anderson is still working on some of the same cases he started working on when he took the job 25 years ago.
We have 8 death sentence murders, and less than half of those are what you would call new cases. The others are old, from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s.
In 2014, the Idaho Legislature's Office of Performance Evaluations conducted a study of the financial costs of the death penalty. It found death penalty cases cost more than sentencing a person to life without parole, because capital cases take longer to resolve than non-capital cases. The last time Idaho executed someone on death row was back in 2012, when Richard Levitt was put to death by lethal injection. His execution came just 7 months after Paul Rhodes was executed.
It was very intense. It was very challenging. There's so many aspects that play into it.
Twin Falls County Commissioner Brent Reinke was serving as the director of the Idaho Department of Corrections when those 2 executions happened nearly a decade ago.
In that time period, it was very difficult to be able to acquire the necessary drugs to be able to carry out the execution. And so that was a very daunting task, working with a lot of other states and a lot of other jurisdictions, trying to understand where we might be able to acquire those, how that might be done. And then we did a tremendous amount of rehearsing leading up to that particular event.
Obtaining those drugs sparked controversy and a call for more transparency, after reports say states like Idaho sent employees to pharmacies in other states with a suitcase full of cash to pick up the drugs to be used in the execution, which brought up questions about the drug supplier, as well as the nature of the drug and its efficacy.
Idaho also has as a very serious issue the question of secrecy and public accountability. The state has said that it's had difficulty in obtaining execution drugs, but when you look at the state's practices, you understand that it's engaged in cloak and dagger activities in trying to obtain the drugs.
Just last month, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed into law a bill that now increases the secrecy surrounding Idaho's execution drugs. A bill some say stems from what happened nearly a decade ago. Supporters of the bill say this was the only way the state would be able to continue to carry out lawful executions because no suppliers of lethal injection chemicals will sell the drugs to the state without guaranteed confidentiality. Looking back on the executions, Reinke called them the most difficult task you can have in the Idaho criminal justice system.
It's something that is permanent. And we want to do that, as I've indicated, with as much professionalism, dignity, and respect, which is what our governor asked of us, and that's what we provided. And I'm very proud of the men and women that carried that out. We made sure that we dotted every I and crossed every T so that we could carry out as the governor wished.
As part of Idaho's policy for executions, media witnesses are present on behalf of the public. Associated Press correspondent Rebecca Boone was one of those witnesses.
So it's an unusual thing in our state compared to some other states, but it's always kind of there in the background because you never know when the next one is going to occur.
She was there to monitor the execution and explain what happened so the public can then decide how they feel about executions and how the state is carrying them out.
They're quite serious. You're seeing somebody be put to death. It's hard to explain the feeling that you get when that happens because it is so far beyond the norm of what we experience mostly in our day-to-day life. There's the human element. You can't get away from the fact that this is somebody who comes into the chamber and you know they know they're about to die, and you know they're about to die, and everybody else knows they're about to die, and then there's families who are hoping this will be closure to the toughest, most awful moments of their lives. Like, it's just all around a very weighty moment.
And with every execution, co-director of the Idaho Innocence Project and the director of the Forensic Justice Project at Boise State, Dr. Greg Hampikian, says there's a risk of a mistake.
We've had over 1,500 executions since they made it legal again in 1976 in this country. We've had 187 people who are on death row exonerated, found innocent. So if we had rapid justice, and I think we do in some states, those people would have all been dead because it takes 10 to 20 years to get someone out.
Dr. Hampikian says that's a huge error rate.
I'm not here to debate the morality, just those numbers. And if you execute someone, there's nothing that all this equipment can do to restore anything to that person. I want them to look at the numbers because I think while we have a gut reaction to crime, and it's horrible, I get to have to see a lot of it, the numbers tell us that we do make mistakes. And do we want those to be irreversible mistakes?
While the debate about the morality of the death penalty continues, many involved in the process agree that transparency is vital to the process.
And it's important that people really understand what that's all about so they can make an informed decision regarding whether they do or don't support the death penalty, or just don't care, one way or the other.
I also asked Anderson what the most challenging part of this process was. He said it was having to tell the family of the parties involved when a person has to be resentenced, because as we just saw, some of these cases can go on for decades, which means the families of both parties are also continuing to deal with that emotional toll. As for Gerald Pizzuto, one of Idaho's longest-serving death row inmates who recently made headlines, the Attorney General's office says the case is scheduled to be argued before the Idaho Supreme Court in June. Now, I did reach out to both the Idaho Department of Corrections and the Commission of Pardons and Parole about this story. Both could not comment on matters pertaining to the death penalty at this time. And we should note, this is just a small aspect of the death penalty. There are so many more layers to it, and we'll have links to resources in this story at KTVB.com.